It's Thursday, January 15th, 2026, and this is Twee Bat. Teachers, we've all been there. Maybe it's a staff meeting, a sit down with your instructional coach, or a breakdown with a colleague. Inevitably, someone will ask you, what is your why? For a long time, I talked about a feeling, a calling, when this was asked. That teaching was something I felt called to do in the same way preachers felt called to the church. I said it was the thing I was supposed to do with my life. For me, having that belief worked for the first 15 years of my career. Then over time, I lost that calling. Teaching is not something I feel I have to do anymore. Since realizing this, I've started the work of finding myself again outside of this lost core identity. This project, this podcast, is part of that journey. Another person who has had to distance themselves from teaching as an identity is writer and teacher Annie Kiyonaga. In September 2025, she published the op-ed, "I Tied My Self-Worth to Teaching, That's Why I Had to Leave," in the journal Education Week. In the piece, Kiyonaga described several key moments where she realized how the internal identity she felt as a capital T teacher impacted how she felt about herself as a person. In today's interview, Annie and I discuss several aha moments about the relationship between teaching and identity, including how it was impacting her relationship with her husband and how she was impacted by how friends and family felt about her choice to be in the classroom. And now, here is the interview. Annie Kiyonaga is an educator and writer based in Queens, New York. Her recent article published in Education Week is titled, "I Tied My Self-Worth to Teaching, That's Why I Had to Leave." The article details how the pressures of teaching became enmeshed with her own identity as a person, and this caused her to, at least temporarily, leave the field. Annie Kiyonaga, thank you so much for joining us on TWBAT today.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so the first question I always ask my guests in education is, how are you? How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm pretty good. I'm feeling pretty good. Yeah. How are
Right?
you?
I'm well. It's easy perhaps to say that we're doing well when we're doing things that aren't standing in front of the classroom at the moment, but
Hmm?
um, that's sort of what we're here to explore, I think. Tell us how you got into teaching as a career.
Yeah. I started, I studied English and art history in undergrad and have always just loved reading and writing more than anything. I worked for a nonprofit after college called ReadWorks, which is like a reading comprehension nonprofit, and I really got into reading comprehension as a field, was super interested in all the theories, all the research. I went to grad school, and it was in like March of my master's program that I just kind of got a gut feeling that I wanted to try teaching. I actually hadn't really considered it before. And in fact, had sort of, I mean, in college, when you tell someone you're an English major, they usually ask if you're going to teach. And I kind of resented that reaction. So I had actively been like, no, I am not going to teach. And I just felt like I really wanted to, sort of suddenly. So I did. I taught for 2 years in Queens. And yeah, now I'm here.
Very good. So, in the article, you talk about how sort of fast it was that the identity of teacher became sort of enmeshed with your identity as a person. Can you talk about how that process happened for you?
Yeah, it did feel really fast for me. I think that not a lot of my friends from college or from my life in general are in education, and I sort of felt like I had to justify my decision to teach to them. I think that was part of it. My family was supportive, but I also had a lot of people close to me, I mean, basically telling me that they thought it wasn't a great idea for me to teach. Um, I think that was part of it. And also I, you know, being a first year teacher is just really hard and tiring. I was giving a lot of myself to teaching, and I think in order to justify doing that, I had to, this wasn't conscious. This is my reflection after the fact, but I feel like I had to make it a really core part of my identity to feel like that was worth it. So yeah, it felt very quickly like it was a huge part of my life, and it felt very quickly like a really important part of not just my life, but who I was and how I was showing up in the world.
what's really interesting to me is that you said that it felt like you almost had to make this part of your identity. I know I've felt that as well. Can you talk about how that felt for you when you started to realize this thing was part of who your sort of core identity was?
I mean, I think there were good and bad parts of that, that feeling like I had to really internalize it and make it part of my view of myself and how I was like interacting with other people. The bad part of it was a sort of, um, I don't know what the right way to describe it was, maybe a rigidness or a sort of a little bit of like a martyr complex. I think when I was talking to my friends who weren't in teaching, I think that I was felt so frustrated by the lack of understanding that I felt like I was meeting a lot of the time from people who were working, a computer job or an office job.
Because you mentioned feeling like a martyr
Hmm.
sometimes, and that's something you write about as one of the sort of narratives that is around teachers. The martyr, the saint, the babysitter.
Yeah.
So, when you think about you, I mean, you mentioned feeling like a martyr sometimes. What weren't people getting about the job that was making you feel that way?
And I think when I say I felt like a martyr, I didn't literally feel like that, but when I look back on it, I feel like that was one of the most unattractive parts of how I was interfacing with other people who weren't in teaching. Like I was sort of always trying to, I felt like I was performing for them a lot of the time, trying, and I wasn't, again, I really don't think I was conscious of doing this. I was just really tired and felt really overwhelmed and was trying to communicate that to my friends and family, but I was sort of I feel now like I was acting sort of like a martyr a lot of the time when I was talking to people outside of teaching about it. And that's really embarrassing for me to admit. It's such an unattractive way to be, and it's not genuinely how I viewed myself or how I view myself now. But I don't know, it was really hard when I felt like people were downplaying how hard teaching is and how important it is, especially as someone who I take a lot of pride in the work that I do. I take my work seriously. I mean, I try not to take myself too seriously, although I think it is clear from the article that I ended up taking myself too seriously a lot in the time that I was teaching, but it was hard not to react to people's reactions by really trying to like be like, no, seriously, this is really, really hard. You don't get it. Like, you really don't understand how it's feeling day to day. You don't understand how important it feels day to day and how much I feel like I'm giving to it and how little I'm getting in return from people around me pay wise. Like all the that mismatch, I think, was a big part of why I was acting like that to friends and family a lot of the time. And I think I'm overplaying it too. I think my friends and family would not say that I was being like intolerable about it, but that was sort of how I felt. I felt very defensive and very um like I wanted to shake them and be like, you actually really don't get it. You really don't understand how this is feeling day to day.
I've felt that a lot myself as well. The particularly the idea of people finding the job to be easy
Yeah.
is something that's very frustrating.
Yeah.
Uh, this leads pretty well into my next question, which is talking about in your writing. You talk about the impact this had on your personal relationships, particularly with your husband. If you might be willing to talk a little bit about what that started to feel like for you.
Yeah. I mean, my husband was so supportive. Also, we got engaged right before I started teaching and we got married the summer between two, I this was like the formation, the foundation of our marriage. I mean, we've been together for a long time before that, but um, he was extremely supportive. He was really proud of me for doing something that he knew I cared a lot about and, was finding really difficult. He hyped me up all the time. He was a fantastic partner to me throughout it, which is why, I mean, in the article, I talk about him saying I was on break and I was back to kind of my energetic, more creative, more enthusiastic self. And he was like, wow, I really miss you. And I was devastated by that comment. I mean, I was like, I think it just really revealed to me how the way that I was showing up for him in our day-to-day life was substantially different than how I had been in our relationship in the past. And he would never call me out on that in a mean way. And that's why it hit so hard because I knew that he was just recognizing it in that moment. He wasn't suggesting I do anything different. He wasn't, I don't know, accusing me of anything. It was just like, it was a moment of real recognition for him, which really made me recognize it in myself really forcefully too. Um, and I mean, I think that same rigidness and kind of the feeling of needing to justify or explain and ha really try to make people understand what teaching was feeling like to me definitely extended to him too. And I think I I could feel myself being less generous with him a lot of the time than I usually think that I am in our relationship. He, you know, again, like I don't even think he would say that this was a pattern, but I feel like if he was complaining about something at work, I would minimize it. If he was talking about being stressed about something, I would, even if I didn't say it, I would, my internal reaction would kind of be like, well, yeah, but I mean, it's not like that stressful. Like I really felt myself doing that repeatedly, which is again a terrible way to be with your like very loving, very supportive husband. So yeah, that was definitely something I noticed coming up in myself over the past 2 years that I did not like.
It's hard when those things happen. I think your article did a really beautiful job of talking about the personal impact that has when you realize you've been acting that way in your personal relationships. I just felt that was very relatable for me as well.
Mm.
Um, so when you stepped away, uh, I guess the question is, do you feel like you've made the right choice? And if you do feel that way, how do you know?
I think, well, the decision to leave the school that I was at was actually very easy. I mean, I really like and respect the school that I was at. I really liked my coworkers. I really liked my supervisor, but at the same time, the school was not doing particularly well. So the decision to leave like that particular school was so easy that it facilitated just not teaching in general. Like that, it didn't feel like that much of a stretch in some ways to just be like, actually, and also I'm just gonna take some time and do something related and go back to nonprofit space, which is what I'm doing now. But I I do feel like I made the right decision. Although I don't know. I mean, I've been going back and forth about it this fall a little bit. And my new job involves, I was teaching seventh grade English before. My new job involves going into high schools and doing literary programming and being with high schoolers. I'm like, maybe I should try a different age group. Maybe part of it was that middle school is challenging in a specific way and I should try high school. I feel like I'm still, they're open questions for me, but for right now, this was the right call. And I can tell in part just because of the sense of relief I felt when I fully decided to leave. And that was just in the same way that I had a gut feeling that I wanted to teach, I really had a gut feeling that I needed to reevaluate what I was doing because I mean, again, as I detailed in the article, I was just being incredibly hard on myself too. Like I was, and this is not a particular, like I'm not proud of that either. I was just being incredibly strict with myself, hard on myself, was feeling like I was failing in every way teaching. And that it just wasn't, that more than anything really wasn't sustainable for me.
Where do you think that feeling came from for you, that this need to be, that you felt the need to be perfect? And if you weren't perfect, seems you were very hard on yourself. Do you feel like that came from school environment and your personal background?
I think it's a me thing. Yeah. And I think it's something really valuable that I learned about myself teaching that I'm super grateful for and am thinking about very actively now. I mean, I think this is a common thing for a lot of people who go into teaching. I always loved school. I always did really well in school. I really liked my job before teaching and felt like I was getting positive feedback a lot. And I would say a lot my first year teaching, I have never worked this hard to be so bad at something. Like that specific combination was new to me and it was really hard. And I think that I mean, I think also it was tied up in the kind of identity entanglement that we were talking about earlier because I care so much about education. I care and cared so much about every kid in my classes, maybe too much. Like I was just I couldn't the stakes felt really high for everything and you know, I never thought that I was the only one who could do something for them or that there was something unique about what I was doing. But in a day-to-day sense, mistakes felt really calamitous and doing well felt really, really important. So I think the combination of those two things was just, it was, yeah, I was putting a ton of pressure on myself.
Can you provide maybe an example? You said that mistakes felt calamitous. Can you maybe provide an example looking back on something that felt calamitous but maybe wasn't actually calamitous?
I mean, I think there were some structural things that would kind of freak out about, like, oh my, comparing myself to other teachers who had obviously been teaching way longer than I had. I mean, I was and am so early in my education career. So, oh, my lesson plans aren't creative enough, or they're not whatever, like kind of on a lesson planning level. And then also just if I had sort of a medium or bad interaction with a student, I would like really beat myself up about it. And that could be like being short with a student, or it could be like, someone did something really inappropriate in class and I handled it in a way that afterwards I was like, was that an overreaction? Was that an underreaction? Like sort of the classroom management side of it too, that was building the plane while I was flying it. A lot of those, and I think some of those things can end up being sort of calamitous, but a lot of them weren't, and I was sort of spinning out about them too. Both things were true.
I've surely been there. Um, that segues nicely. You talked about comparing yourself to other teachers, and one of these veteran teachers told you that teaching is just a job, and that was some advice to you to about how to handle yourself in the classroom. What what about that advice hit you, and how did it hit you?
I mean, it really just ran counter to how I think I'd been raised to think about work. I really like and respect that teacher in particular, and she was, you know, how they say people are like someone's a girl's girl. She was like a teacher's teacher. She was really supportive. She was super encouraging, and also she had very clear work-life boundaries. And she was like, I'm not showing up for anything outside my contract hours. This is, she was that kind of teacher. And I think I'm still figuring out what my relationship is to that comment. I mean, yeah, I think I was raised to think that work was something bigger and more meaningful than just a job. And I think in some ways that stance is it can be really helpful to not feel bored or sort of depressed by the day in and day out of just like working. Like I think that I still stand by parts of that stance, but also I went too far. Like with teaching in particular, I was viewing it as way more than a job in a way that was actually undermining, you know, the way I was showing up at that job. So I don't know. I think there's a balance that I still am trying to figure out how to strike.
Do you think it's possible or even desirable to view a job in education as just a job?
Not really. I mean, but I sort of think that speaks to my personal stance on work. I think for some people that would probably be a sustainable way to think about it and would not lower the stakes, but allow it to just feel less overwhelming. I think for me, I need to be I just need to be a little more bought in than that. Like I think that specific framing would actually maybe just lead to me kind of retreating and not, I want to bring a lot of myself to the work that I do in education because I care so much about it and I'm really interested in it. I think it's really interesting to talk about and interesting to think about. I think I was probably bringing 80% of myself to work and I should have been bringing like 60% of myself. Like I think that there's just a middle ground that would be better for me and my better for everyone around me. Better for everyone. Yeah.
More sustainable, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
This article you published, it was in September. and you were obviously writing it before then. So do you still feel the same way about returning to the classroom someday? In the article you mentioned that you think you might. Do you still feel that that's the case?
Yeah, I mean, who knows? I don't have a plan. I mean, I'm working at a nonprofit again now in New York, um, which feels I really like. But I do, as I was saying, I think even just being in different high school classrooms this fall, I'm kind of like, huh, I wonder, yeah, I wonder what the right school fit would be. I wonder if there's an age group that would work better for me, all those kind of questions. I mean, I already feel differently about the article than I did when I wrote it in July or August or whatever, and it kind of like word vomited out of me. I think I kind of needed to think through all of this and I think by writing and that it just kind of came out and already I'm sort of like I feel sort of distant from that version of myself, but um I do want to go back at some point. I don't know exactly when though. I think like when I decided to teach a couple years ago, I think it'll be when I'll know when I know. Like I don't think it's not something that I'm planning around right now. I kind of just feel like it'll hit when I'm supposed to go back.
What are some of the ways you feel differently than the person who is in that article?
I mean, I feel farther from I think in the summer I mean I was still technically employed by my school. I was on summer break. I think I was much more in a transition period between, feeling like I was a teacher and it was so important, and now I'm going to switch to something completely different. It's going to be this huge transition. Now that I'm a little further out from that and in a new job that still involves being in classrooms and is still part of the education world, I'm kind of like, oh, I actually don't feel that distant from it. It feels like I'm still processing and bringing in the things that I learned from teaching and, you know, the boundary between teaching and not teaching feels a little more porous on this side of it than I think it did on that side of it.
So what do you wish the general public knew about the inner lives of teachers that you think they maybe don't quite understand or don't have the right perspective on?
I don't know. I mean, this isn't the inner lives of teachers, but sorry, I think that, I mean, one thing that just bothered me immensely while I was teaching was the implication that I was babysitting. And that's not about the inner lives of teachers. That's just about societal perceptions of teachers generally. But teaching is by far the hardest, most intellectual, most creative job I've had. And there's, I can't think of one thing about it that I thought was easy. I think it probably gets easier as you keep teaching, but I resented that implication so much. And I think, I mean, for me, for my inner life, I think, I don't know, I think it probably would have been really helpful if people in my life and in general had if if the channels of communication had been more open and I had felt more able to talk honestly about how I was feeling day to day, but that's not really a an assumption that anyone else was making. It's probably more on me than on them. So,
So it comes back to that idea of how much pressure you, at least, and I relate as well, are putting on ourselves to do it exactly right.
yeah.
And then, last question. Now that you're on the other side of this forest wall between your identity and teaching, how have you gone about the process of sort of finding yourself again?
I don't know. That's a really good question. I mean, I've been writing a lot more, which is it's a part of my identity that's important to me and something that I really made an effort to prioritize this summer and that I was not doing really at all while I was teaching. And that was like actively bothering me while I was teaching that I felt like I didn't have the energy or mental capacity to be doing that. So that's probably the main like switch that I've made. I also just, I mean, I live in New York City and I love living here. And while I was teaching, I sometimes felt like I kind of could be doing it anywhere because I was just looping between school and my house. I feel a lot more grounded in New York now, and like I'm going to a lot more events and just trying to, both see friends and just do stuff in New York that makes living in New York great and worthwhile. Um, I think those are the two main things I've been doing, writing more and trying to just do more in my neighborhood and in New York.
I did think of a follow-up. So I'm sure I already know the answer to this actually, but could you maybe elaborate on the idea of, do you have any regrets about anything or about how you approached the job, or when or how you went into the field?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I feel like regret is a strong word. I think that I, this is kind of niche, but I feel like because I felt sort of uncertain or kind of I don't know. Yeah, uncertain mostly. I feel like I was sort of like fussy with the kids sometimes, or I was just sort of like roundabout or kind of like making a big deal out of things that didn't need to be made a big deal out of. One thing I really liked that I learned from a lot of the veteran teachers at my school was just they had just had a clarity of like purpose and they had a vision and they knew exactly where they were going. The kids knew exactly where they were going, and that also meant that they didn't get sidetracked by stuff that in the moment really felt important to me. I never felt like I was, elevating anything that was dumb, but afterwards I'm kind of like I should have just been a little more transparent and like clear. And I don't know, that's kind of vague, but yeah, it was just I mean, I think that's just something you learn too. Hopefully eventually I get there, but I really liked that quality in other teachers, and I could feel the mismatch in myself between that way I wanted to be and then just day to day how things were actually going.
I really feel that. In particular,
Hard.
the idea of, especially like early in my career, just getting so mad so easy. Uh,
Hmm.
I remember like my third year teaching, I made a New Year's resolution with myself that I was just not going to yell anymore. That like, there's no like nothing good comes of it. It's just not a worthy use of my energy. Harder to do than it was to, I thought, but I got better about it because I really
Yeah.
made the time to focus on it.
I know, and I didn't yell. I didn't really get mad. It was more that I would have like extended conversations with kids about stuff that I didn't need to be having conversations with them about. Like I felt like I was being sort of like I'd be like, we really need to talk about this. Like, you need to come over here and talk. And it's gonna, and in retrospect, I'm like, I should have just kind of moved past it and kept going for a lot of the stuff that was happening. Like, I was sort of being precious about certain things that I think I could have been a little less precious about.
Okay. Annie Kiyonaga, thank you so much for joining us on TWBAT. I really appreciate your time. Where can people find your writing online?
Yeah, my website is Annie Kiyonaga, my full name.com. Or I'm on Substack also at Annie Kiyonaga, where I write about books I'm reading and other stuff.
Very good. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. This was great.
Thanks again to Annie Kiyonaga for joining us on today's TWBAT. If you'd like to support the show, there are several things you can do to help. First, share the show, share the episode and the show itself with friends and family. Rate and review it on your podcast listening software of choice. And follow us at TWBAT on Instagram and Blue Sky. If you're so inclined, you can also purchase TWBAT merch at TWBAT.com. Our next episode comes out February 1st and features an interview with Dr. Smita Weekland, who wrote her dissertation about the resilience teachers of color have to have while facing systemic racism. I hope you'll join us, and until then, please take good care of yourself.